The Boston Tea Party wasn't really about tea. It was about power, pride, and protest. In 1773, Britain ruled the American colonies. Parliament's new Tea Act let the East India Company sell tea directly to America. Cheaper, yes, but still taxed. To the colonists, that single tax symbolized something bigger. Taxation without representation. They had no voice in Parliament, yet they were forced to pay. In Boston, a group called the Sons of Liberty decided enough was enough. As ships loaded with British tea drifted into the harbor, the city's anger began to boil. Soon, that fury would spill into one of the most daring protests in history. This is how revolution began, with a cup of tea. On a freezing December night in 1773, Boston Harbor fell silent until shadows began to move. Dozens of men from the Sons of Liberty, faces hidden beneath cloaks and feathers disguised as Mohawk warriors. 3 ships waited in the harbor: the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver, each heavy with tea and tension. One by one, they smashed open the crates and hurled 342 chests of tea into the icy harbor below. The harbor turned brown with tea. A fortune lost, but a message sent. This was no act of chaos. It was a statement. Across the Atlantic, the British flag trembled, the Empire's grip beginning to slip beneath the waves. That night, the world's most famous cup of tea was spilled, and the revolution began to steep. When news of Boston's defiance reached Parliament, the Empire trembled with fury. The King's patience had ended. In 1774, Britain struck back with a coercive axe, closing Boston's port, dissolving its assembly, and placing the colony under martial rule. Redcoats filled the streets. Trade stopped. The harbor fell silent under Cannon watch. Boston had become a city under siege, but from oppression, unity grew. Across the colonies, leaders gathered determined to resist and to stand as one. As dawn broke over the 13 colonies, rebellion no longer whispered, it thundered. The fight for liberty had begun. In 1774, colonial leaders met in Philadelphia. For the first time, 13 voices spoke as one, united in defiance. Months later, redcoats marched from Boston toward Concord to seize the Patriots' weapons and crush rebellion before it could spread. Through the night, riders galloped across the countryside, warning that the British were on the move. At dawn, on Lexington Green, colonists stood face to face with the Empire. A single gunshot shattered the silence, and history changed forever. By sunset, the colonies were at war. What began with a protest over tea had ignited a revolution for freedom. In early 1775, Boston was trapped. British troops held the city, while thousands of patriots surrounded them on every hill. Through the night, the colonists dug in on Breed's Hill, determined to defend their ground at all costs. At dawn, British forces attacked in waves. Twice, they were thrown back until the Patriots' powder ran dry. "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes," the cry echoed as men stood firm against the storm. The British took the hill but lost over 1,000 men. The price of victory proved the strength of the American cause. By 1776, the war had spread across the colonies. Many now called not just for justice, but for independence. In a quiet room in Philadelphia, Thomas Jefferson put quill to parchment, writing words that would change the world. Delegates debated fiercely until, at last, they stood united. On the 4th of July, they declared America free. Each signature was an act of rebellion, a promise to risk everything for liberty. From the fires of war, a new nation emerged, bound not by kings, but by the belief that all are created equal. As the declaration spread through the colonies, Britain struck back, with force bringing the full might of its empire to the new nation's shores. With courage and resolve, George Washington led an army of farmers and tradesmen fighting for liberty against impossible odds. On a freezing Christmas night, Washington led his men across the Delaware, striking back at Trenton and reigniting the cause. The courage of the revolution inspired nations abroad as France joined the fight for American independence. Through defeat and triumph, the spirit of liberty endured, carrying a new nation through its darkest hours. (1777) at Valley Forge, Washington's army faced the bitterest winter. Hunger, sickness, and despair stalked every campfire. Through the cold and suffering, General Washington held his army together, a beacon of courage when hope ran thin. Under Baron von Steuben's command, the weary troops trained tirelessly. From chaos, a true army began to rise. With shared hardship united soldiers from every colony, their loyalty to liberty stronger than hunger or frost. As the snows melted, the army marched anew, hardened, disciplined, and ready to fight for freedom's dawn. By 1780, Britain shifted its might to the southern colonies, hoping to break the rebellion where loyalist support was strongest. Charlottetown fell after a long siege, one of the worst American defeats of the war. But in the Carolina backcountry, militia leaders like Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox, waged a new style of war. Frontier patriots crushed loyalist forces at Kings Mountain, a victory that rekindled hope across the colonies. Town by town, ridge by ridge, the patriots fought on proving that the spirit of independence could not be extinguished. In 1781, Washington misled the British into thinking he'd attack New York while secretly marching his army south. American and French troops marched hundreds of miles, driven by a single goal: to trap the British at Yorktown. At the mouth of the Chesapeake, the French Navy cut off escape, sealing the British inside. Cannon fire pounded British defenses as American and French forces closed in from all sides. On October 19, 1781, Cornwallis surrendered. The war was all but won, the dream of independence nearly realized. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed. The United States of America was finally recognized as free and independent. But independence came with uncertainty, a weak government, war, debts, and 13 states pulling in different directions. Debt, inflation, and hardship spread across the young republic, leaving farmers desperate and the new government struggling to survive. Anger exploded into open rebellion as farmers rose up against crushing taxes. The young republic faced the terrifying question, could it even survive? Farmers in Massachusetts rebelled against crushing taxes, exposing the government's inability to keep order. By 1787, the young republic was falling apart. Unpaid salaries, interstate conflicts, and uprisings shook the nation. States taxed each other, printed their own money, and fought over trade, proving the Articles could not hold the nation together. Under the Articles of Confederation, Congress had no power to tax, no power to raise an army, and no power to keep order. Leaders from across the states demanded reform, calling for a convention to save the nation from collapse. After months of debate, a new framework emerged, a government strong enough to endure, yet limited enough to protect freedom. Across the states, Americans clashed over the new Constitution, some fearing tyranny, others demanding strength. Federalists argued for a stronger union, while anti-federalists warned against centralized power. In newspapers across the country, Hamilton, Madison, and Jay made the case for a new government, one essay at a time. To secure ratification, Federalists agreed to add a Bill of Rights, a pledge that individual freedoms would be protected. In 1788, the Constitution was finally ratified. After months of fierce debate, the states agreed a stronger union would secure America's future. In 1789, George Washington became the first president entrusted with turning the Constitution into a living government. Washington and his cabinet shaped the first laws, agencies, and responsibilities of the executive branch. Alexander Hamilton proposed a powerful financial system combining state debts, creating a national bank, and strengthening America's credit. Washington's cabinet split in two, Hamilton driving a bold new vision, Jefferson warning of tyranny in its shadow. A nation's future hung between their clashing ideals. From the fierce clash of ideas came America's first political parties to rival visions, battling for the soul of the young republic. Next episode, America post-Washington. New conflicts, domestically and internationally.